Yep. Yep. Go live.
It's now streaming live, it says.
But you want to just watch this on your Zoom because it gets distracting.
Yeah, I'm not going to watch it on the Facebook. Okay.
That's streaming live now on Facebook.
Okay.
Ralph.
Oh, now we're live. Okay. I'm going to hang up. Have a good conversation.
Thank you, Laurie.
Bye.
There's Ralph.
There's a nice windy-haired picture of Ralph we had. All right, Ralph's coming back. Thank you, everybody, for bearing with us during these technical difficulties. Very excited for today. My name's Ross Guttler, and I run the Open Center, and I'm here today with Anthony Bossis. Anthony, you go by, does everybody know you by Tony?
Yeah.
I call you Tony. Yeah. Okay. We're here with Tony Bossis. You may see his name sometimes written as Anthony Bossis. That was your given name. Your parents.
Anthony always spoken Tony. I don't know how that works out that way.
You're with Tony Bossis and also here with Ralph White, our co-founder, long time since 1984. And we're here talking about a new series that we are launching February 22nd, a 6-part series on the Psychedelic Renaissance, past, present, and future. And this series, and we're going to do more programming in the future, this series is focused a lot on the research. And so I know today we want to just sort of have an open conversation around, I think, how this was a vision between the two of you. I mean, you guys pulled this together. So I'd love to hear a bit of that story. And then I think we can open up the conversation from there because I have some other questions for you, Tony. So welcome everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks. Great to be here. Thank you both.
Hi there, Ross. Sorry for the technical problems. I'm talking to you on my iPad.
We're here.
But anyway, here we are. Did you get a chance to introduce Tony before I link back in?
Well, you know, I didn't really give like a proper bio. So
okay, well, I'll do that. I'll just so people have a sense of who Tony is. Because as Ross was saying, you know, the Open Center has pulled together this with Tony's very active engagement here, to say the least, pulled together this series that Ross mentioned, the Psychedelic Renaissance, Past, Present, and Future. So we're very happy to have Tony Bossis with us today. So let me give you a bit of background. He is a clinical psychologist. He's clinical assistant professor of psychiatry at NYU's Grossman School of Medicine, where he conducts clinical, psychedelic, and mystical experience research, and has done so for over a decade. Some of you may have come across his work in Michael Pollan's book, or you may have seen some of the films that he features in, one called Psychedelia that's been re-released, a wonderful overview, and another one on death, dying, and psychedelics. Recommend them both highly. So Tony was the director of palliative care research and co-principal investigator of the landmark 2016 clinical trial demonstrating a significant reduction in emotional distress from, and in fact, Tony and his two colleagues there were from NYU gave their first presentation about their scientific results right when these first emerged. So we have felt connected to this for a long time. And as you know, the Open Center has done 25 years worth of work in the dying field. So that's really how we came across Tony now. So he is one of our leading people anywhere in terms of clinical research in the therapeutic value of psychedelics. And as you'll see when we get to the series later, as Ross said, there's a strong emphasis upon the clinical dimension, the research that's going on regarding end-of-life distress, different forms of addiction, etc. But we're also, one of the things that sets this series apart is that we are dealing with the history too. In the ancient world, in antiquity, what happened with these things, these substances or compounds in antiquity, in the ancient Greek and other mysteries. And also we're going to be looking at its use for millennia within the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere. So anyway, just a little intro there, Tony. So great to have you with us. And it's really nice to be doing this with Ross and you this morning.
Well,
so Lovely to have you here. So I was thinking that maybe we could start. Tony, just tell us a little bit about you and your own personal journey,
Sure.
and what took you to the realm of palliative care, and then to this field as well.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much, Ross and Ralph. Delight to do this. And as Ralph knows, I know Ralph many years now. And as Ralph knows my personal story, I've been an Open Center fan and follower since its opening back in the mid 80s, which seems like another lifetime ago. It's just incredible, just incredible. But you know, the early days through the years, I mean, seeing Houston Smith and Ram Dass and on, the great, all the great events at the Open Center. So big fan, and always delighted to work with Ralph and you, Ross, at the Open Center. You know, it's interesting as the psychedelic landscape takes its next step here. One of the main things is educating the public. You know, the research, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, is going really well, and we're getting good scientific findings and done carefully, and FDA-approved clinical trials. But it's educating the public that matters as well. And I think the Open Center provides that platform for public education on a host of issues. In this case, the meaning-making implications of psychedelics. How I came to this, you know, like a lot of people of my generation, in my 20s, I was interested in meditation and started with TM, and was kind of a seeker of the world religions. And I was just struck early on by what they call the mystical core of the world traditions, at the core of the 6 wonderful religious traditions in our world. Despite their different, gorgeous, separate frameworks and lineages, there was this connection to the ineffable, transcendent, mystic core. And it really struck me. And I, you know, like all of us back then, read a lot and was taken by Aldous Huxley's work. And through that, I discovered all the writings from the 1950s and 60s on psychedelics as a way to generate that mystical experience. And that just, I found profound. And I kind of digested all that information. This is pre-internet. This is the old days where you went to the New York Public Library and microfiche, and you found books and used bookstores. And that's how we discovered things back then. But it was such a treasure for all of us who remember those days, going to used bookstores and going to the shelves and finding these incredible books by Watts and Alan Watts and Huxley and everyone else. So that really got me going, that incredible literature. And like all of us, you know, we're all Beatle fans. I remember George Harrison speaking about these medicines as helpful to him, and that helped in many ways. And a parallel track was my interest in end of life and existential thought and how we die. And I went on to pursue palliative care as a profession. Had founded the palliative care service at Bellevue Hospital and work with end of life patients. And the research from the first wave of research showing that a single dose of a psychedelic, in those days it was LSD primarily, could generate this incredible peak or mystical numinous experience and profoundly change how people died. And it really stayed with me. And in the mid 80s, I made a decision to hopefully want to pursue this line of work. There was nothing happening back then, not a great career move, but here we are doing it. And it worked out. I'm very grateful for how it worked out. And we're doing this research, and we're seeing a reemergence of this research in so many different applications. We'll talk about end of life today, but we'll walk through the other speakers in this wonderful program you've put together on all the applications of psychedelics now to maybe understand what is consciousness, where is consciousness, what is all this, why they're linked, why is this mystic core linked to the foundations of the great traditions, how can they be helpful as medical tools in healing people. I like to always say, when I remember to say it, is that I think we're wired for meaning. We're wired for connection to some incredible experiences, and it's been the heart of, I think, civilization and poetry and philosophy and religion. And it seems that psychedelics that have been around for millennia in indigenous cultures as well might be a tool to better understand all this, and now to help us heal from a lot of diseases, cancer distress, and people, there's been studies with smoking cessation and eating disorders and depression, anxiety, so PTSD. So we'll talk about it all today, I'm sure, for a little bit. And so that's my journey here, and it's a remarkable time. And it's also, I just want to put a caveat out there. It's a very, I think it's a tenuous time, and I think those who do the work and those who follow it need to be careful that this is serious, meaning-making, a field, and that we don't repeat the mistakes done 40, 50 years ago when it was shut down, when there was an incredible body of research back in the 1960s shut down because of a host of, cultural issues, that we take it seriously, which it is. And these medicines and these experiences that they generate can really promote healing and insight. So happy to be here. Thank you both. And I look forward to this 6-week series that we'll talk about, and whatever else we talk about.
Tony, you, first of all, wired for
Yeah,
meaning
well, Tony,
is such a
go ahead, Ross.
wired for meaning is such a beautiful concept, because in a way it feels self-explanatory, and in a way it beckons further consideration and like deep contemplation. So I wrote that down. I want to sit with that later. You said two things though that I wanted to ask you about, and they're related. One is you used the word existential when you were talking about our relationship with death, and you also alluded to consciousness. And I wonder, you as a thought leader and researcher in this field, who has been, what texts and thought leaders themselves, could be thousands of years ago, have been most influential on you?
Oh my God. That'll be a long list.
Okay.
I mean, in terms of the research, we have, from the first wave, Albert Hoffman and Stan Grof and Walter Pahnke and Bill
Right.
Richards, and as we have a lovely body of literature coming out of the 50s and 60s. In terms of existential thought, Yalom and Ernest Becker and Kierkegaard, all the philosophical schools of that. And like most of us, a lot of my beginnings, Alan Watts of 50 years ago, his works really changed me. And there are so many, but I think in many ways we would keep rediscovering the wheel, and I find so much value in the early writings, going back to the early traditions. When you look at the mystic core of the Vedic literature or the Christian mystics and the apophatic theologians and the roots of Western civilization that Ralph is so good at teaching as well. The teachings from Buddhism, in terms of what are we doing here? What is the nature of self? And it dovetails with, Ross, you brought up the word consciousness, which is, the big word. I think it's the final frontier of science. What is consciousness? Where is it? We have no idea. There isn't a person on the planet who has a full understanding. That's, I think, the next final frontier. And there are two main, I think, primary questions. One is, where is it? Is it generated by this incredible, remarkable brains we have that are just beyond understanding, and that generates our individual consciousness? Or is it somehow more remarkable than that? Is it somehow in part outside biology, or something, the source is something different, as the mystics speak about? And that, these are the ineffable questions. And I think we're in an exciting time in history, and it feels like an inflection point in a way. It's been a tough time, clearly, for the world right now, with COVID and so much political shakeup. And it seems as though we're revisiting these important issues. What are we doing here? What is the purpose of spirituality, meaning making? And are we on the cusp, and how we're treating our planet? So there's so many issues arising in this, I think, this very interesting inflection point. And as it turns out, psychedelics reemerged during this incredible window. And could they be of help in healing medical disorders? Can they be in help of understanding meaning and spirituality? So, sorry, Ross, long answer, but so many influences, many. I think and I think it's best to draw from all the different schools we have available to us as humans. So many great writers and thinkers over the year, from theosophy to the world religions to science to psychoanalysis. They all point, I think, in some way to the same thing. And finally, as you both know, religion and spirituality weren't always separate. Until the 1600s, they were kind of the same. It was one impulse to describe what is all this, and they became separate avenues. And people like Alan Watts and Ralph Metzner and even Carl Sagan would say they shouldn't be separate. We're all trying to figure this out. And so could the sacred and the scientific, both merge together as a way to figure this out? And I think, not to give you guys a free promo because you don't need it, but I think that's what the Open Center does. It integrates, the science, what we know through study, and then what we intuit and know through spirituality.
We'll always take free promos, Tony. We're a nonprofit. I mean, we need all the help we can get.
That wasn't a plan to the audience. That wasn't a plan. They didn't make me say that.
Tony, I had such a visceral reaction and clear imagery of you describing consciousness as the final frontier, and almost what I saw while you were describing it was psychedelics as a potential avenue toward that frontier. Like, if this is a destination, it's a frontier. What's the path to get there? What is a path? Might not be the only. And the thing, I guess, about that frontier is we'll probably need multiple paths all working in parallel, right?
Yeah.
Or maybe can you get there through any individual ones on their own? That's a deep question there.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there are multiple models and ways of understanding, and that's the beauty of it, I think, of integrating all the models, all the paths, and not just committing to one, but at least understanding there are so many ways to look at this, and these medicines aren't for everyone, clearly, and there are risks, and we'll talk about that today. So yeah, but the consciousness is just so interesting because, what are we doing here? How did we get here? What is all this? It's the ultimate question, and that poets and saints and everyday people have been talking to, trying to understand since the birth of consciousness. And I will add one thing. The mystical experience that we're going to talk about today that these medicines can generate and have been shown to be the mediating factor in the best clinical outcomes in the research is not just the psychedelics. They're profound throughout history. They occurred naturally by all the mystics and saints, the foundations of the major traditions, and everyday people. A recent Pew study showed 49% of Americans report having a peak or mystical experience of some type. So we're wired for meaning.
Wow.
But not these long 4-hour experiences with psilocybin, but we're wired for connection. And what is that? And why is it relatively infrequent or not so infrequent as this one Pew study showed? And that seems like the ultimate question, which anyway.
You mean the ultimate, what are we doing here? Is that the ultimate question?
Tony,
what the hell are we doing here?
Yeah, what are we doing here? That's a good question. That's the question that these medicines can help us engage with, along with many other spiritual paths, that core existential question. But I was thinking it'd be a good idea for us to have a chat about the upcoming series. Yeah. And starting on February 22nd, it's going to be a 6-part series from 7 to 9 p.m. on Monday evenings. And as we mentioned, some of it will look at the more historical aspect in both the Western mystery tradition and in the civilizations of the Western Hemisphere, the indigenous civilizations. But there's also going to be a very strong focus on the therapeutic aspect, which is Tony's real specialty here. So Tony, can you tell us a bit more about the results that you and your colleagues have been having in working with the dying facing existential dissenters in the series, and the kind of research work that they're doing at Johns Hopkins and with MDMA, with MAPS and the Mithoffers and so on?
Sure. You broke up a little bit. Do you want me to walk through the 6 weeks, each presentation briefly?
Yeah.
Sorry, what was that, Tony? I broke up, did I?
Yeah, I'll walk through the different weeks. Is that okay?
That's a good idea.
Yeah. By the way, Ross, I mean, your question, name your influences. I mean, there's so many people, as the Epicenter has highlighted over the years, from the scientific, Albert Einstein, who famously said, religion without science is blind. Science without religion is lame. I mean, this integration of the two people like Thomas Merton, T.D. Suzuki. I mean, from the spiritual to the scientific, so many incredible minds to glean from. So
Tony,
anyway,
Tony, I'm going to go back and get this recording, and we're going to put out. I want to share the list of everybody you've named in this chat. I think it's such a great, like, here's a bunch of good people to go look at and read what they thought. So thank you for sharing a reading list for people for the next 5 years.
Right. Well, everyone knows these are the great foundations of our civilization and our culture. So this is a great 6-week series. Thank you, Open Center. Let me briefly walk through the 6 weeks and just give a shout out to each speaker and their topic. I'm so honored to be among these folks. So kicking off on February 22nd, our series opener is Brian Murarescu. Brian wrote a New York Times best-selling book. It was released in late September, following up on the famous book of the 1970s by Carl Ruck, Albert Hoffman, who discovered LSD, and Gordon Wasson, who went to Mexico and brought back the psilocybin mushroom to the Western culture. He followed up on their research exploring the potential evidence of entheogens, which means cultivating the divine within, or psychedelics in prehistory, throughout history, antiquity, and centered around Eleusis, this ancient site in ancient Greece where Plato and others were believed to have drank in something called kykeon, which was a Greek liquid that we believe to be an ergot alkaloid psychedelic. And Brian's book opens that up and explores the possibilities of other places and venues that may have occurred and that'll linger even into the first few centuries. After antiquity and ancient Greece. So a fascinating book. It's a fun book. It's kind of reads like an adventure, and it's got a lot of attention. So and it really, there's so much work about Eastern religions and the mystic core, but it's nice, as Ralph is an expert in this, to highlight some of the foundations of Western civilization also in terms of the mystical core. So that's a great opening, and Brian's a great speaker, and it's a great book, and we look forward to that. The second week, I'm going to review, Ralph was mentioning the scientific findings on psilocybin and end-of-life care. What many people may not know is this research began in the 1960s and 70s and 50s, really, with LSD and DPT and other compounds. And the two indications to come out of that era was for alcoholism and for terminal disease, terminal illness stress, the emotional distress. By the way, the alcoholism lineage, many people may not know, Bill Wilson, who founded AA, had taken LSD many times and attributed those peak experiences to his understanding that the spiritual ablation of the need to drink was a possible path forward. On the other side was these findings back then by Stan Groff and Bill Richards and Walter Pahnke that a single dose of a psychedelic could produce this mystical experience. And I'll quickly define that as an affability, hard to describe, the noetic quality, a term by William James, that you're encountering ultimate reality. It's not just a drug effect, it's like ultimate reality you're encountering. Sacredness, transcendence, the sense of transcending the body, consensus reality. If you're dying of cancer or of anything, the notion that my body's beginning to fail and will soon not be working, but that I'm something different. I'm something more enduring. Spirit is something more, my soul, whatever this is something more enduring than just my body. Or that the body just, we do end, but there's a profound gratitude for having lived this one life. So we'll review those findings by Johns Hopkins, UCLA, NYU, and we're going forward. And hopefully within 5 or 7 years, psilocybin is rescheduled by the FDA, somewhere in the next 10 years for sure, I hope, to be used in hospice and palliative care to help us die better. The Open Center has been a champion of with their Art of Dying Institute. By the way, great George Harrison song, The Art of Dying.
You got it.
And
that's where it came from.
I know
that.
It came from, Ralph? Oh, that's cool. I never knew that.
Yeah, I got it from the George Harrison album, All Things Must Pass.
Must Pass.
Yeah.
And so, hopefully
Tony.
these will be medicines soon enough to help us die better, because we don't die well. In the third week, we have a big night. There's so many great people speaking. The Johns Hopkins team, part of the team, will be here. One is Bill Richards, who really is the only person now on the planet who was involved in the first wave of research back in the 1960s, who's still doing research, and I consider a mentor of mine, and an incredible resource for wisdom. He's a psychologist, and he's has a degree in religion, I think, an MDiv, and he'll speak about his life, the research, end of life, spirituality, incredible. And Dr. Albert Garcia Roma, who's a researcher there, incredible researcher, and they'll review the history of Johns Hopkins, all the studies they're doing: cancer, eating disorders, smoking cessation, meditators, healthy people. They'll review their data and their implications for the future. So that's really, and they're the dream team. The Johns Hopkins team is the dream team of psychedelic research in the world. We then follow up with an important night with Dr. Rick Doblin and Dr. Michael Mithofer and his wife Annie Mithofer. Those three people are responsible for all the work you read about with MDMA, which is a compound called sometimes an empathogen. It evokes this incredible heart change, but they're showing that it has an incredible effect on PTSD, treating post-traumatic stress disorder. And that has made a lot of headlines, and people have read that. And Rick Doblin heads MAPS, the organization, and the Mithofers have been just champions of this research, and just profound clinicians and lovely human beings. So they'll review the groundbreaking research and where that's going in terms of when that'll be rescheduled, when it'll be legally available for people with PTSD.
And the data on that is just so impressive.
Incredible. No, they're just
Hard to believe.
Incredible.
Really, if you see it, it's hard to believe.
No, one session. The same with the psilocybin. It's the one session, and that's why, there's a debate. Not a debate, but is it the biological component? Is it the phenomenology of the experience? It's a one session. It's one experience that's sustainable for sometimes for decades. It's the memory of that insight, and that tells me, at least, that we're back to wired from eating. It connects us with a perspective on what we're doing here. It puts our lives in a much larger panoramic field, our suffering in a very larger kind of broader landscape, and it redefines the nature of self or death or suffering. So then we move into out of the clinical. So I love the way Ralph organized this. We did this. One is it begins with classical antiquity. We have a few weeks of the clinical implications, and we come back to the broader lens. Mark Plotkin, a world-renowned ethnobotanist, who's one of the last students of Richard Schultes, who is the father of ethnobotany, who spent his life exploring the healing medicinal nature of plants and indigenous cultures from Mexico to Argentina to the Amazon. He currently works with many organizations looking into the application of these incredible plants and medicines. And we're really fortunate to have Mark. He's a great speaker, and his research is really just foundational. And I'll speak about Schultes too, who really is an incredible figure in this entire movement. And then we close up with another big hitter, Paul Stamets, who's kind of the big world-renowned mycologist now, who explores all types of mushrooms, from medicinal to healing to nutritional to, of course, the implications of psilocybin medicines. The movie Fantastic Fungi, if people haven't seen it yet, profiles his wonderful life and work. He's the author of 7 books and received numerous awards. And he'll talk about his work with mushrooms and psilocybin and the potential healing applications, not only for illness, but what we've been talking about today a little bit for consciousness. How can they be of tools when done seriously? I want to keep returning today and throughout the course. We're talking about the serious, sober use of these medicines. Now therapeutically, these are still illegal medicines, but they merit a real sober and serious look, not some of the other ways it can be portrayed sometimes in the media. So that's a quick look at this incredible 6 weeks. And I'll stop there for a moment.
I did see that documentary is great, by the way. I watched it with my parents early in the pandemic.
Perfect.
And you know what I loved about it is the psychoactive part of psilocybin. That's only a fraction of what that documentary is about. I think it's beautiful just to understand mushrooms in general as a organism.
Yeah, I learned from that too. I didn't know all that. And so I went into it thinking, it's going to be about the research and the psilocybin mind-changing component. And then all these other applications that Paul's been involved with and that has been going on throughout history, which, so I recommend to the viewers to see that movie as well, maybe before you see Paul Stamets' talk. So yeah, it's incredible.
Tony, you said some, and I don't know if the answer's out there. You mentioned 49% of people, and I'm assuming that's Americans maybe that they have reported to having had a mystical experience. Is that completely subjective, or is a mystical experience like you put people on an fMRI machine and you can delineate between a mystical and non-mystical experience?
No. So no to the latter. I don't think biological reductionism will determine the phenomenology of the subjective experience. And our research is through rating measures, and the 6-measure scale that I mentioned before: transcendence, ineffability, noetic quality, sacredness, paradoxicality. Those are gleaned from a scale devised in the early 60s by Walter Pahnke and Good Richards, in part, gleaned from the work of William James and Walter Stace. What is the mystical experience when it occurs naturally? What are the features? Walter Whitman, all Spinoza, all the folks who talk about it, and took those items, those domains, and made a scale out of it that we still use today. It's been revised. It's statistically reliable and goes through all the science, moves, but same scale. So in this study, they didn't diminish that scale, I don't believe, but just self-report that 49% of people reported having those items. It wasn't part of a scientific study, but it speaks to the pervasive nature of this. Alan Watts beautifully said once that the language for this is kind of pushed out of the culture. So I think a lot of children have these experiences. You're in the woods, you're doing something, and for a minute you kind of, you're feeling some connection with nature or some change in consciousness. But there's no context or vernacular or lexicon to talk about it. And Alan Watts would say we push it out of the culture. Like in his book Island, it's into the culture. They talk about it. It's a great book, by the way. That's Huxley's Island. But Watts refers to that it's talked about as part of the spirituality. So I think, we're wired for meaning, but those experiences are pushed out of, spirituality as well. And they really form the foundations, we believe, of the transcendentalist movement and the major religions. And, we can go on, all the various incarnations of that.
Yeah, Tony, our series is subtitled Past, Present, and Future, the Psychedelic Renaissance, Past, Present, and Future. We've looked at the past. We know that the research, the wonderful research is going on at Johns Hopkins, NYU, and at UCLA and elsewhere. What about the future, Tony? What's your sense of what that may hold, and health benefits of these compounds becomes clearer? What's your sense of where we're going with this?
Yeah, great question. So I hope that clinically the research continues, these FDA-approved clinical trials at so many places around the world now, Yale and London, at Imperial College and Hopkins, of course, and then there's myriad medical centers beginning to do research and getting on board with this. So the hope is that in time, 3, 4, 5, 7, 10 years, MDMA, then psilocybin, and maybe other compounds are rescheduled, meaning they're available clinically for people to use in controlled, regulated settings, not to be given out and to be just available to the public at large. But that, Albert Hoffman's vision of the discovery of LSD said that he would hope that, like at Eleusis in ancient Greece, there would be centers people can go to and in the current zeitgeist have interpersonally supported, safe, effective therapies, screened properly for medical and psychiatric exclusionary criteria, the way we do it in the trials, for people who are dying, for people who have contending with a very complicated, life-threatening disease. Could that exist for other ailments, depression, PTSD? So could it be part of healthcare? Could these medicines revolutionize psychiatry and medicine in a way that one or two experiences treats and maybe heals, or at least profoundly reduces the distress of a disorder? That's amazing. You know, most medicines people take your pick, Prozac and your blood pressure medicine, whatever you're taking, your anti-anxiety agent, it works as long as you're taking it. You take it every day to maintain some kind of desired effect. These medicines you take once or twice, but the experience, the memory from the experience is what recalibrates that person. So they're not really drug studies. It's like an experience study. It's connected to something that seems to recalibrate people's, be it depression, anxiety, end-of-life distress, whatever it is. So I hope, Ralph, it's integrated into healthcare in a careful way. I hope the culture at large maintains its carefulness and we don't repeat the errors of the past. And could it be used in non-clinical ways to understand consciousness, to understand creativity, to understand the common ground of spirituality? So I think there are myriad implications, and we'll see. I mean, much of it is unknown and we don't know a lot. There's another book, The Cloud of Unknowing, Ross. So we don't know a lot and we have to kind of surrender to not knowing.
I mean, with
Yeah.
I was thinking there around how one or two experiences can have multiple decades long impact. Do we know yet, or what do you theorize is more of the impact intellectual, in that it can change your understanding of something, let's say your relationship to alcohol or some other substance and you're trying to get over that, or is more of the impact embodied and in the subconscious? And it's like there's that long lasting impact, the change in your life. Is it more you tweaked an understanding of something, so I'll call that the intellectual, or something changed in your body that you might not be able to describe or pinpoint?
Yeah,
probably both, but I wonder which one more is.
Yeah, you asked the big questions, and I'm very comfortable as I get older by saying it's above my pay grade over and over again. We'll quote George Harrison again, Ralph. There's a great song, "The Inner Light," where he draws from the Hindu scripture: "The farther one travels, the less one knows." So there's a lot of unknown, a lot of unknowns here. But I think, Ross, it's when we understand the way I see it personally, and it is the memory of that experience. It is the insight of that experience that, yes, is embodied in a sense, but that it's a connection. I think it transcends the intellect. Actually, when we guide these sessions, we tell people, try to let the intellect, leave that outside the door for today. Don't try to analyze what's happening, what's coming up. Just be with it. Be with the unfolding changes, like you would in a Vipassana meditation.
Right.
Be with the changes, lean into them, and by moving into the changes in these very profound altered states, people cultivate insights and even transformation and profound experiences. So I think it's a combination of obviously experiential, it's an emotional memory. Obviously intellect matters when we begin to kind of apply it to our life. But I think that's the exciting part, that we're looking at all this. And I don't think it will ever be narrowed down to one easy, this is it. It's connecting. Look, if you give people this medicine to 100 people, there might be some common core experiences, but there's 100 different experiences.
Right.
Some people have taken medicine and not been, there's been some harmful effects. Some people have not done well with it. Throughout our history, we could name people who have taken it and not been very altruistic or healing. So it may just amplify part of who you are. Hopefully it opens up to a new part of who you are.
This feels related to the Einstein quote you gave before about the relationship of science and spirituality, which seems to be, for me at least, and just listening to you, this field, so much of it or almost all of it doesn't fit neatly in any little box.
Right. Yeah.
It transcends the boxes. It spills into all the different boxes, which is the blending of science and spirituality.
And that makes it so exciting. You know,
Right, yeah.
the biology is important, obviously. We have to know what is this brain doing, but
Yeah.
I don't think a biologically reductionist approach is going to be the answer. The phenomenology is important, but we want to know what's happening with the brain as well. It does draw on philosophy and religion and science, and I think Albert Einstein really was a modern day mystic. And you know, if people read about his writings, and there were many on religion and spirituality and science, he was quite profound, and he wrote a lot about those topics. And he was like, you know, what did they, you know, like Sagan called his God was the God of Spinoza and Einstein. This incredible complex cosmology that exists, so we don't know, it's ineffable, but that we want to understand. So, but I agree with you. I think we could draw upon all types of models, and that makes it exciting. You know,
Oh man, so much. Yeah, to draw on so many different parts of our history.
right?
It's like you can come at this because you're a philosopher, you can be a historian, you can be a scientist, you can be a mystic person, you can be a religious person, you could be
Anthropology.
Yes.
I mean, yeah, on and on.
right.
History. Uh,
It's the
yeah,
confluence of all
modern
of
culture, which makes it great. So people say,
it.
"Can you, you know, can you speak for an hour?" You can speak for 25 hours. There's so much. There's so many
Wow.
models to draw from.
Tony, I don't think, and this is something I've read plenty on, I don't think I realized how this is such an amalgamation of our whole history, really. All the different types of thought and philosophy and science and relationship, they all do flow into this. They're all related.
I think this meaning this experience, not just a drug. I want to
No, no,
reiterate
no,
this.
no.
But yes, the experience, what you know, and clearly, and again, you come back to the zeitgeist we're in, an incredible time, just incredible. All the changes. I look at my window because you know, all the changes going on. And is it an opportunity to impact some change? You know, we're not doing so well at it. Some could say, because when it first began, COVID began, people were, you know, well, this will prove we're all connected, and we really are. Proof, you know, case closed, we're connected. Um, and you know, but however, it hasn't gone so smoothly as we know throughout the last year. But could it be it's sort of like a dharma lesson for the world, you know? Impermanence, everything is fleeting, but beneath that, is there something more profound about who we are and that we're connected, which was what these medicines tell people who are dying. When they move through the suffering and despair of having to leave this incredible miracle of a life and our loved ones, do they find some insight and some connection there, as the Buddhists and Hindus and Christians and Jewish lineage and Islam and all the Taoists have all spoke about? Is there something deeper there that's profoundly enriching and important? And let's hope this incredible zeitgeist is a chance to move into that.
Yeah, well, certainly the Open Center has been dedicated since the beginning to the proposition that there is a deeper reality and a profound mystical consciousness that can be accessed, and that our culture needs to move towards that direction. And the more it does, the healthier our future will be and our present. So I was just thinking, you know, before we all sign off, let me just go over the details of some simple details of the upcoming 6-part series. So again, we begin on Monday, the 22nd of February. It's a 6-part series from 7 to 9 p.m. each evening. You can register for an individual session, or you can register for the whole series. Obviously, there's a discount if you register for the whole series. And as Michael Pollan, whose amazing book, How to Change Your Mind, was such a big hit last year, he described our series as an all-star lineup. And you can't argue with that. And it's really thanks to Tony that we have that all-star lineup. So I'm really grateful for everything you did, Tony, to make this series possible. And I think it's really dynamic. And also, if this goes well, it certainly looks like it's going well, we will be looking at doing a more in-depth ongoing program, perhaps, in this whole field, because it's a major burgeoning field. And it has a lot to contribute to our culture. And we're only just discovering through science and through history
It's a
and
journey.
through research, you know, just how much value there is in this.
You guys have really
Did I break up?
a true journey. That's I think everybody needs to take all 6 pieces together. I think to get a real surface.
Yeah, if you
to
can.
get a more comprehensive understanding. Ralph, you're cutting in and out, so I was going to try and pick up for you a little bit there. Well, what Ralph was saying, it's 7 to 9 o'clock on Monday.
I'm breaking off, so I'm going to sign off. So we're going to sign out. I'm losing him.
Okay.
Bye.
7 to 9 o'clock every Monday, starting February 22nd. The sessions are going to be, the first half will be more panel. Tony, you're interviewing people, lecture style, and then we'll have Q&A breakouts so people can actually meet other folks and discuss in small groups in the field. And then we'll have additional Q&A. So it'll be really engaging. It's not just going to be a, lecture you're watching on YouTube. People will really be a part of the experience and a part of the whole journey over the course of the six sessions. And then they'll be recorded too. So if you sign up, you get the recordings. If you can't, let's say you live on the West Coast or you live in Europe and you can't make 7 o'clock East Coast time, you can always watch the recordings later. I'm really excited about it, Tony. I feel it's having folks like you with us, who Ralph has been bringing around for now 37 years, is what makes the Open Center special. What makes it so educational and special to me. And what makes it so powerful and influential for so many people now across the world. We have a worldwide audience. So I know we're really excited about it. And personally, I'm excited about it too. It's a great, great topic. So Tony, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Ralph, I'll see you later, buddy.
See you later.
OpenCenter.org. I should have said OpenCenter.org. Although if you're watching this, you probably
The Psychedelic Renaissance, opencenter.org. Okay, bye.